Hello. I'm going to talk about NATO and the recent challenges to NATO by and NATO countries by the United States, by Donald Trump. These challenges have raised concerns about the safety of fellow NATO nations. It is important to note that there is a historic context for this in Trump's first presidency, where he talked about the fact that if NATO nations did not meet the requirement or the goal of 2% of their GDP going to defense funding, that he would not protect them in case of attack, that he actually encouraged Russia to attack countries that did not meet that goal. And recently, this month, in fact, we have seen some significant attacks verbally on fellow NATO nations by the United States. So, as we know, the Trump administration engaged in what they call a peace plan with Russia, but they are not allowing Ukraine to be involved in that peace plan. This, of course, has unsettled European allies, European NATO nations, and the United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth suggested that the United States expects Ukraine not to reclaim its pre-2014 borders, and that this was unrealistic. The United States has also downplayed the likelihood of Ukraine joining NATO. With this, Trump announced a cooperative agreement with Vladimir Putin, which excludes Ukraine from the negotiations. This has very much been likened to the 1938 Munich Agreement, raising fears among European diplomats about a peace settlement that overlooks their interests. The UK in particular has urged Ukraine's inclusion in future discussions, and the British government faces internal debates over increasing military spending to address these geopolitical concerns. If you're enjoying this video, please hit subscribe and like. It may not be important to you, but it's very important to me. Thank you. I want to talk also about the increased defense spending demands that I mentioned previously. So NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has mandated that member nations significantly boost their defense expenditures beyond the previous 2% GDP target and aim for considerably more than 3%. This directive attempts to respond to criticisms from Pete Hegseth, who advocates for a minimum 5% defense spending requirement. The fact is that no member country has met the original 2% target, which was set over a decade ago, and yet NATO plans to prioritize defense spending over other areas such as social welfare. The new budget goals are slated for finalization at a June summit in The Hague. While the U.S. maintains its commitment to NATO, it has made comments that suggest it may not always accept NATO. It may not always agree with NATO's goals. The UK has aimed to act as a mediator between Europe and the US, especially amid diplomatic discussions regarding Ukraine's potential NATO membership. Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, has emphasized the UK's role ahead of a pivotal week involving a European leaders summit in Washington and a potential visit to Washington by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Reynolds highlighted the importance of shared defense responsibilities among European nations and the U.S. despite recent tensions and Vice President J.D. Vance's contentious speech at the Munich Security Conference. Reynolds believes in the resilience of the transatlantic alliance. He also addressed the necessity for increased UK defense spending in light of global pressures. The Paris summit, which was led by Emmanuel Macron, the French president, seeks to establish a unified European stance on U.S. exclusion from peace talks and Ukraine's future in NATO. I want to give a hypothetical scenario. What could happen if the U.S. acts aggressively towards a NATO member, such as an ally like Canada? And while it's highly improbable and unprecedented, the potential is there. So NATO's foundational principles and Article 5 assert that an armed attack against one member is an armed attack against all members. And it obligates each member to take action to restore and maintain security. That is the foundational principles. However, Article 5 is primarily intended to address external threats, not internal threats. It does not explicitly outline procedures for situations where one member attacks another. And this leads to ambiguity regarding the alliance's mechanism for internal conflict. Potential responses to this internal aggression include diplomatic measures, such as interventions that would likely or designed to de-escalate tensions and resolve conflicts through dialogue. They also involve suspension or expulsion, so NATO could consider suspending the membership of the aggressor nation. While the North Atlantic Treaty does not provide explicit provisions for expulsion, Article 13 allows for any party to cease membership 1 year after notifying the U.S. government. Additionally, under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, a material breach could justify suspension or expulsion. And of course, collective defense measures. The alliance might simply choose to invoke collective defense measures to support the victimized member, though this would be complicated by the aggressor's status as a member. United Nations could get involved for broader international mediation and resolution. There are implications for NATO's cohesion and credibility. The alliance's foundational premise of mutual defense against external adversaries does not readily accommodate scenarios involving internal aggressors. Addressing this gap is imperative to maintain trust among members and uphold the international stability. And given the recent threats by the United States towards other member states, it is important that this be addressed. The behavior of the Trump administration and its interactions with NATO underscore the alliance's resilience amid external pressures and internal disagreements, but it also brings forth some very significant concerns. Although aggression towards other countries such as Canada are highly unlikely, they are not improbable. To safeguard its future, NATO must adapt to these concerns and continue to develop its jurisdiction to address not only external threats, but internal threats. And with that, I say, remember, if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and like. And remember, to be senior is to be proud. Hugs.